What's going on, my people, my people? Welcome to another episode of Through a Culture Lens. My name is Michael Anthony, and with me as always is a woman who can kill two stones with one bird, Miss Amber Gray. How you doing, girl?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I'm hanging in there. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Can't complain. It's
Good.
I'm glad that we was able to get back together. But definitely had a good weekend. I heard that you had a nice weekend as well.
I did. I'm trying to recoup. My voice is not the same. I'm trying to recuperate. I was in New Orleans hanging out with my sorority sisters, my chapter. It was an amazing weekend, and I am trying to get back to normal, which has been difficult.
Okay. Well, now look.
It's been great.
Well, welcome back. Welcome back. Of course, we definitely saw all of the stuff that was happening in New Orleans. If you follow Amber on Instagram, she definitely looked like she had a ball.
Yes.
So I'm definitely happy that you were able to get some rest and some relaxation.
There was no rest. That was not a restful vacation at all. That was a turn-up vacation. So I got to have another vacation for the rest.
Oh yeah, understood. Yeah, it's one of those you need a vacation, from your vacation sort of situations.
Right.
Would you say?
Right. Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. It's awesome to be back though. So thank you guys for joining us. I see that we have Aunt Lisa is in the house, so thank you, Aunt Lisa, for
Yes.
joining us today. And we just want to go ahead and go ahead and get right to it.
Let's get right to it.
This is going to get right to it. So, today our topic will be talking about DNA and the African in my American. And this has been a topic that has been going on for years about people with DNA testing and sort of looking at African American or Black culture prior to slavery. And
Yeah.
what is your initial thoughts as far as like this topic?
This is something I've been interested in probably for as long as I can remember, honestly. Before these Ancestry and 23andMe companies were a thing, I've always wanted to know, where my people come from, tracing my roots. And that's something that, up until the last, about decade or so, we really haven't had the opportunity to really get that information, at least get some sort of like ballpark of where we might have come from. So it's great that these organizations exist. Obviously, we'll be talking about a couple of the you know drawbacks to some of them, and but I do think it's one of those things that Black people within America or in the diaspora in general have probably all thought about.
Mm-hmm.
I'm obviously not from America. If I had that information, that would kind of complete me. So I think that's something we probably all have thought about at one time or another. What about
Mm-hmm.
you?
Yeah, it's a very personal topic for me. I actually did my thesis, my master thesis on this subject. And the question really came about because I was feeling like African Americans were acting or were being told how to be Black rather than us actually, driving our own narrative. Watching
Wow.
different
Yeah.
music, different TV shows, and just how people mimicked those things. Like me and you have talked about, like the
Yeah.
Vans and the skateboard outfits.
Exactly. Yeah.
I felt being on the East Coast that when Lil Wayne started doing those things, then all of a sudden all the young Black kids and people like that started jumping on as well. And
Right.
so I was like, is this thing, are we being taught how to be Black as opposed to us actually driving our own narrative? So I wanted to sort of explore this African in my American. And the real question was, do African Americans have an identity crisis because we're the only ethnicity in America that does not know where we come from, especially within Africa. Like, we know we come from Africa, but we don't know from where within. And with Black culture being the start of it came from slavery,
Right.
how do we sort of have these conversations? So I did my thesis on it. So it's something that I'm very familiar with, very passionate about, and something that I'd just love to have a conversation with you and everybody with about.
Yeah, and this is probably, again, as we always say, this is a start of a bigger conversation because
Mm-hmm.
everything you just said, it won't necessarily be in this show,
Oh
but will
no.
be in future shows because it's a deeper, more complex kind of look into, what is the African American? Like, who is the African American? Because
Mm-hmm.
everybody, as we've seen, as we've talked about TikTok, right? Everybody wants to do what we're doing. Everybody's looking to us for the next latest thing, for the next latest trend, for the way to dress, for the way to walk, for the, all these things. So
Black girl magic.
obviously,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. So obviously, who we are or who we've kind of cultivated ourselves to be means something to everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we take it away, like they did in TikTok, I mean, I think they're going about 3 or 4 weeks strong now of
Mm-hmm.
not creating any dances,
Mm-hmm.
which has made TikTok pretty dry. I don't use TikTok, don't know how to use it, but it's made it pretty dry from what I've seen in YouTube videos and different social media spaces because Black content creators, we're not getting their just deserves. We're not getting their just deserves as far as creating these dance moves, these intricate dance moves, these trendy dance moves, and then the white creators or non-black creators were, basically stealing it and then making tons of money off of it, which usually happens with us. We have these great ideas and then somebody takes it and makes so much money off of it. So obviously who we've who we are is popular, who we are is money making. So we are something.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of what we are has been created based off of, necessity, based off of, we had no
Mm-hmm.
other choice.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's a
Yeah.
deeper conversation for
It's
sure.
so much of a deeper conversation. Like I just read an article today about not blaming rap music for the violence. And there's something that, we definitely have to talk about as far as
Yeah.
identity, ethnicity, and different things like that. But before, we sort of get into it, we just want to go over a little bit of the definitions of what there's two different ancestral DNA testing that you can go through. And of course, before I continue, we do have a couple more people. I see that my mama's in here. I see that my cousin Kevin is in here. That's my brother who I grew up with. So appreciate y'all obviously being in here. And anybody else who's in here, thank y'all for watching. We
That's right.
appreciate it. Please subscribe, like, hit that notification bell, and just let everybody know because just
Get
like
in the
these,
chat.
yeah, exactly. But there's two different kinds of ancestral testing that people really don't know what they are. People just think you just swab your mouth, send it into the labs, and then you get some information back. But people really don't know that there's sort of two different kinds of DNA ancestral testing. And I know this is very small, so we're going to go to the full screen version right now. And so you have two. One is your genetic ancestry. And basically what that is they take the Y chromosome, which is from father to son, because it changes unpassed, and we are able to see what deep ancestry we have. So with the people who are currently living in a different region, how does our DNA sequence match up with them? Then we also have the mitochondrial DNA, which is from the mother, and that's what the mother passes to both the son and the daughter. And so one of the things that people get confused about is that men can trace their DNA ancestral back to, for their father and for their mother back, but females can only do a deep ancestral test only on their mother side, and it's just science. And so I was able to do the deep ancestral test, and of course I will let everybody know what my results are. And the second one is the admixture test, and that one is looking at ethnic background and how ethnicities have migrated and have intermixed. So if you have people from Africa and native people, Indians, let's say from Peru, and if they mix together, then their offspring has a mixture of different ethnicities in them. So that's whenever you see on the Ancestry.com or 23andMe, whenever be like, oh, well, I'm 23% Scottish. I'm, 5% African, and they show these commercials to really tie into the identity of how people, kind of feel about themselves and sort of give them some sort of ancestral background.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that's one thing that people don't quite understand, which is why, if anybody's watched, Henry Louis Gates, Finding My Roots, especially like his very first season, he really went into depth about how a lot of Black men, when they do their genetic admixture,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of their genetic admixture has more Caucasian
Mm-hmm.
than the female, than the X chromosome, just because of our history with slavery and our history of, unfortunately, forced
Mm-hmm.
sexual assaults on the
Mm-hmm.
women. So they gave birth to, you know,
Mm-hmm.
biracial children,
Mm-hmm.
multiracial children. So that
Mm-hmm.
is going to come up if, on the
Mm-hmm.
father side a lot, because that
Mm-hmm.
means that the males who were, forcibly having sex with the slaves,
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be on the male side, which is one of those interesting things where it's like, how are they more quote unquote white than, the women? But that's just because of our history with chattel slavery.
Exactly. And one of the definitions that talks about admixture, if you look at sort of the bottom part, not the bottom of the page, but the bottom of that first definition, it says invasion is one of the I guess, characteristics that you have to
Right.
look at when you're looking at admixture testing. And
Right.
so, we wanted to kind of go over with you guys, like, what is it that we were able to find out. And both of us, well, I took the test. Now,
Yeah.
you got your results from.
My parents.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
okay. So both your mother and your father took the test, correct?
That's right. They took the Ancestry DNA test, and yeah, we got some interesting results that keep changing. So that's another thing. They keep, I mean, at one point, my dad had like Armenian come
Mm-hmm.
up, and he had a whole lot of Asian ancestry, and then some of that is gone now. That's because what happens is, as the pool of people within their sample size, gets bigger, then they have more DNA and more information to kind of, filter out for everybody. So everybody's gets a little bit more specific and a little bit more specific as more
Mm-hmm.
people kind of agree to be a part of like their sample.
Mm-hmm.
So every couple of weeks, my mom's like, "Oh, our DNA changed. Oh, our DNA changed." I'm like, "What?" So our percentages kept changing, off and on based off of, how they've kind of widened their net, I guess, of DNA samples that they were able to capture for these different regions throughout the world.
Right, and I did mine off of African Ancestry because they have the largest database of African DNA samples than the other companies. So I felt that by me going with them, that I would at least get somewhat of a higher accuracy rate by
Right.
going through them, since they have the larger sample size of African DNA. And
And
so,
then more specific. You
and more
you got more
specifically.
specific information.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I do get a lot
Mhm.
more specific, and so I did the deep ancestry. I really didn't worry about the admixture stuff. Now,
Mhm.
if my aunt Nita, if she was on here, she's the genealogist of our family, so
Yeah.
she's done all of this stuff. But it's funny because we actually yielded different results based off of our mother's side. So my mother,
Mm.
I got her information, but then my aunt, which is my mother's sister, full blooded,
Yeah.
got a totally different results from my grandmother's side. So it's really
That
kind of
is so
wonky.
bizarre.
It
God,
is
that's why we can't wait to get a genetic specialist in here because that is like, wait, what?
exactly. It just makes no sense. It just makes no sense. So starting off, of course, ladies first. We have your family's results, and so could you break it down for us a little bit of like what the results said?
Yeah, so as you can see, I'm very Nigerian, which I was completely like, yeah, that makes sense. Both my parents have, my mom has a little bit more Nigerian than my dad. So my dad's got 30, my mom's got 36% Nigerian, my dad is 33.
Mm-hmm.
And then my dad has been in Togo, 23%. My mom's Cameroon, Congo, and Western Bantu people. Now, is that, I can't see, is that 20%? I can't tell.
20%, I believe so. Yes.
Yeah, 20%.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you see, so my father's side, as you see, now we're getting into higher percentages of the Caucasian
Yeah, European.
on my dad's side
Mm-hmm.
because of chattel slavery. So
Mm-hmm.
my dad had England and Northern Europe 10%. My mom's still in Africa, so my mom had 17% Mali.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have Germanic Europe for my dad, 8%. My mom finally gets her little 9% English,
Mm-hmm.
Northern European percentage. Mali, my dad, 5%. My mom, Scotland, 9%. Ivory Coast, Ghana, my dad,
Mm-hmm.
4%. Thank you. I'm
Mm-hmm.
struggling.
I
Thank
got
you.
you. I got you, girl.
Thank you. But what I find interesting is, again, the higher percentage of the Caucasian. So my dad, I'm just going to go down my dad's side more. So went down Mali, 5%, Ivory Coast, Ghana, 4%. And then we have Wales, Scotland, 3%, Spain, 1%, Baltic, 1%. Now, when we first did this test, the first results, my dad did have Native American
Mm-hmm.
on here. And like I said before, he had an Asian, like a, some sort of Asian percentage. These were all like 1 to 3%.
Mm-hmm.
And then he had Armenian at one point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then now my mom, we'll
Mm-hmm.
go back to her. So
Mm-hmm.
the England, Northern European, 9%, Scotland, 9%, Ivory Coast, Ghana, 3%, Germanic Europe, 2%, the Benin Togo, 2%, Portugal, 1, Wales, 1. So definitely have some interesting numbers here. I'm sure these will change again
Mm-hmm.
at some point when they get more data. But
Mm-hmm.
uh, similar to you, I wasn't really shocked by the African part. I was like, yeah, okay. Like I wasn't really shocked. I wasn't even shocked by the Caucasian side. It's just more interesting as you start to learn more about how genetics work and this how these admixtures work. Of just seeing way more of a spectrum of Caucasian in Europe on my dad's side than my mom's. That was just kind of interesting.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, he definitely had a lot more on his side, which he has more. Well, your mother has like 2% more Nigerian
Right.
than your father does. but he just has a longer list that sort of takes, you know, that DNA and sort of spreads out kind of across the world.
That's right.
Um, and so it sort of tells you, like, you know, not only with the chattel slavery, which obviously it looks like that your mother and your father's ancestry comes sort of from the same place, you know,
Right.
Nigeria. But then, depending on their migration, of course, once again, through slavery,
Mm-hmm.
being bought, sold, traded, you know,
Yep.
as you said, the sexual assaults that were happening going on,
Mm-hmm.
that's how all of these other ethnicities sort of came in there. But then, even with the different African DNA that's in it, that's just not Nigerian,
Right.
which sort of shows you how these camps of slaves had to intermingle and fell in love with each other and sort of
Yeah.
built their own culture. So at least they have high percentages of that, you know, and not as much
Exactly.
of the European in them, but it just tells you, you know, with the invasion of people, how definitely our DNA makeup definitely changes over time.
That's right. Yeah, and what's interesting is they do a little bit deeper as far as where in the United States
Mm-hmm.
they think that your people come from. So they got a lot right, like specifically Texas. Like, and my aunt's on the show, so like
Mm-hmm.
our my mom's side, they're from Texas,
Mm-hmm.
and then on my dad's side, they're from Arkansas. But we had a
Mm.
mixture of Louisiana in there too. So we had some
Mm.
Louisiana,
Like some
Arkansas,
Creole.
kind of mixed in on my dad's side. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Which
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. But yeah, but like you said, it's interesting. But when you do this kind of test, you're kind of left with, well, what do I do next?
Mm-hmm.
What is this information? What can I do with this information outside of just kind of having like, I could spin the globe and go, okay, we're from here and from here and from there. But it's like, what connection do you actually have to the continent once you do something like this? That's kind of where I'm at now. It's like, well, what's next with this info?
Right. I mean, I would almost assume, which of course, you know, they say do not assume,
Right.
but if anybody else would have received these results, they'd have been like, oh, well, both my father and my mother's side is from Nigeria. So that
Right.
means I have to see that as like a birth home for me. Like that is a
Right.
country that I can identify with. The thing is,
Right.
though, where in Nigeria? Nigeria is a country. It has many different cities and
Hmm.
provinces and tribes and
Languages, tribes.
languages and
Yeah.
things like that. So not just Nigeria, but where within Nigeria. It's almost just like the United States. You know,
That's right.
in the
It's
United
like,
States. Mm-hmm.
where exactly?
Mm-hmm. So it's very interesting, but you know, at least we know that you black though. So that's
Check. Black.
you passed the diversity test.
Exactly.
So then when it comes to mine now, I did the genetic ancestry. And mine came out that on my father's side, since from father to son it's unchanged, so that means all the males dating from me, even to my son now, but then to my father and then to his father and so on and so forth back, that we identify our genetics with the Yoruba tribe in Nigeria. So we could be cousins.
Right.
We could
Right.
be
We could be.
family, and you know, well, of course, we're probably like 15 steps removed by
Right.
now because
Right.
I
Right.
haven't done my admixture test. But you know, to know that you know the Yoruba tribe of Nigeria, and then I did a little bit of research on them, and it seemed like that tribe sort of was kind of brought about, you know, became a larger tribe with what's the other tribe? Because you had mentioned them,
Ebo.
the Igbo tribe, correct? That those sort of came about around the time of colonization. So there is some questions in there as far as is that an original tribe? Because I think most of us we want to identify with Africa pre-slavery, you
Right.
know,
Right.
pre-colonization. But the
Right.
Yoruba tribe doesn't necessarily give me that. Now, my mother's side, this is where it gets interesting, and this is where the separation comes, is that my mother's side is the Fula people of Ghana,
Hmm.
the
The
Mandinka,
guinea.
of Guinea, sorry, oh, good Lord, thank
Yeah.
you, of Guinea, the Mandinka people of Senegal, and then the Mindi and Timin tribes of Senegal, Sierra Leone, I'm sorry, Sierra Leone.
Hmm.
And you know, so that's a little bit more up on the horn of Africa.
Right.
And so, you know, to have my mother sort of spread apart. Now, this is where the interesting thing is that my aunt, who I was talking about earlier, she
Hmm.
informed us that we're Cameroonian.
Hmm.
And I think I told you this story, but when I did the DNA test, I actually have a certificate from the African Ancestry saying that my mother's lineage is from Cameroon. I lucked out because when I was doing my thesis, a person on my committee is a DNA ancestral diasporic expert. And she was the one who knows the owners, or the yeah, I guess the owners and CEOs of African Ancestry. So I received an email from the president of African Ancestry, and he sent me an email with this information on it. So I don't have a certificate saying that, you know, the Fula people of Guinea or the Mandinka people or anything like that. I actually got an email from the person who had the results saying, oh, the certificate that you got is wrong. This is actually correct. So if I didn't know this person, three degrees of separation, I probably could have been thinking that my mother's side is Cameroonian and my father's side is Yoruba tribe of Nigeria. Which is
Another part of the confusion.
it just it just adds just another layer to it.
Yeah.
But I wanted to do this because of, once again, trying to figure out my ancestry and this whole African and my American. Just this was a good exercise to sort of do that. I wanted to kind of look into. So you sort of finding this information out, did this change like your thoughts at all as far as you being a black woman, you being African American, anything like that?
Not necessarily, because like I said, I even before these companies came about, I wasn't questioning, my African
Mm-hmm.
ancestry of any sort.
Mm-hmm.
I think there probably was more of a question. I think this is one thing that even once you start, if you watch, like I said, the Henry Louis Gates show, or even just talking to your family, I think black people have all got this oral history of, your great great grandmother, your great great grandfather was Cherokee, was Apache, was
Got Indian in your family.
this, right?
Yeah,
Was
yeah.
Blackfoot. So I think that we always have this kind of dialogue. So I think I probably was more shocked about that, of not having any of that. But I think that and it's going to take more conversation with somebody who really is in this field, because I think most black people are not getting that back. They're not getting any sort of Native American back. And I think we all kind of had this idea that we had to have some, right? Like we had to have a little bit of something, but we just, we don't. And I don't know if it's because of, the Native American genocide, of just not having that DNA, of not having enough of just what's been done to them. We don't have maybe a bigger pool to pull samples from. I don't know. I'm kind of just grasping at straws here, but I just think that that might have been the biggest shock. I was not nowhere near shocked about any of the information that I got. I think what I was expecting, maybe 3% Native American. Like, I think a lot of us maybe thought we'd have a little bit, but that was my only kind of like, oh wow, okay, there's none. But that was it.
Yeah, that is funny because everybody always says, like, especially if you have straight hair, if you
Mhm.
black, you ain't associating with the white slave master, the overseer, as far as giving you that straight hair. You like, oh no,
That's
I
right.
got Indian in my family. I got Mohican in my family,
Exactly.
because I'm a fighter. I got Seminole in my family.
Mhm.
Now, of course, there were, some mixtures of Indians and blacks, but I'm thinking a lot of black people are starting to realize, like, as the white man was sweeping up the Indians, they was bringing us in, and the last thing that they needed us to do is to commingle at all.
Yeah.
They did not need any of that mess going on at all.
Right.
So,
Right.
what's the chat talking about? What's the chat talking about?
Let's see. We've got, my aunt said, we always thought your dad looked Middle Eastern,
Mm-hmm.
which has all
Mm-hmm.
been a family thing. But yeah, your Uncle Phil said now it's time to record family history and tell the story. And I said,
Mm-hmm.
we totally agree. That's one thing
Mm-hmm.
we've talked about, is really
Mm-hmm.
just getting that family history down. I think we all kind of say that and we don't do it, but we need to do it while our elders are still here.
Mm-hmm.
We need to do that for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And your mama's people of the Jubba Jubba tribe. I don't know.
That's my Uncle Pete. See, always stirred up trouble. Always stirred up trouble, in his retirement. Well, thank you, Uncle Pete, for always joining and making sure that the chat is live and in charge.
Exactly. And then my aunt talking about my grandmother having Osage, and that's what I was gonna say, Auntie, because I've always heard we have Osage in us, but doing these tests, as you see, my mom, your sister didn't get anything. She got no Native American in her at all, as far as these tests are concerned. So it's one of those things where it's like, we have these oral histories being passed down. They do these genetic testing now. It's not 100% absolute. But I don't know anybody who's come back with really anything. Like I said, my dad had 1% Native American in the very beginning when they did the test, and then that disappeared once they kept, getting new information, and then now that's completely gone. So I just don't know.
Which is a great segue to, like, these companies. So, like, how are they even coming up with any of this stuff?
Right.
How are they yielding these results? And of course, we have a whole bunch of companies out there, and we're going to put this information in the show notes, but did a little digging and found out that with DNA companies, there's over 1,000. I think there's 1,074 companies right now as of 2019 though. So of course, 2020 things kind of slowed down.
Yeah.
But DNA company, it's a $3 billion business. So that
And
means
it's
they,
not federally regulated.
and it is not at all federally regulated. It is a capitalist business.
Right.
And so what these companies do is they gather up, different samples from around the world. And one thing about my results too, just to let people know, is that my results said that I have DNA sequences closer to the Yoruba tribe in Nigeria of today. So they ain't exhuming no bodies and,
Right.
testing the DNA and the bone marrow and all that other stuff. They are testing people probably in the last 20, 25, 30 years, possibly to
Right.
even do this. And each company has their own algorithm, which is they're putting patents and trademarks and things like that because it's their own proprietary algorithm to even give you the results. And they're always getting more and more samples, and that's why different results are coming up. So it's one of those things of like, you have to understand that these are for-profit businesses. So you have to sort of walk a little lightly whenever you get these results and not necessarily put too much in there because they are out here to try to make dough.
A
And
buck. Yeah.
and so you have like 23andMe, which is the big one, and Ancestry.com, and of course Family
Yeah.
Tree DNA and MyHeritage DNA. And there's also tons and tons and tons of
Right.
other ones that are out there doing it. And of course, recently we're starting to hear that on the business model, they're starting to hurt a little bit. Especially
Hmm.
2020 was not a big year because
Yeah.
people were really trying to not get sick. People didn't want to get that
Exactly.
Rona.
Right.
So people weren't trying to figure out what their ancestry was. But now these companies are starting to get into pharmaceutical companies,
Hmm.
hospitals, and actually getting bought by these companies.
That's right.
What's your thoughts on this?
Um, like I said, it's not federally mandated, so these guys can kind of morph into whatever they want to with your DNA in a database,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
we're kind of entrusting these companies to do the right thing with our personal information,
Mm-hmm.
but um, they're not really obligated to because nobody's making them. Nobody's making them do it. So as you've said, they're kind of morphing since about 2019,
Mm-hmm.
morphing into more of a health centered model. So
Mm-hmm.
23andMe, I think, had already started doing some genetic testing type things, like for different cancers, different, like things like, are you more prone to diabetes? Are you more prone to
Mm-hmm.
whatever that might be?
Mm-hmm.
And now a lot of them, like the family tree DNA, which you brought up,
Mm-hmm.
not only are they morphing into more medically specific information, they're working with Department of Defense.
Mm.
So, for instance, Family Tree DNA had to apologize to consumers because they were allowing law enforcement to kind of use their data to track criminals and use it for cold cases and stuff like that. And I
Mm.
think most of us probably are like, okay, we're not. Most of us are not out here, hopefully not involved in cold cases,
Mm-hmm.
but that's still kind of a breach of what somebody's DNA was meant for, right? So they
Mm-hmm.
had to apologize to consumers, and a lot of them, even the big ones, 23andMe
Mm-hmm.
and Ancestry, said that they will not release DNA, to law enforcement unless there's a subpoena. So they're still working with law enforcement. The
Mm-hmm.
Golden State Killer. So the Golden State Killer was somebody who was killing from, I believe, the mid 70s and was finally apprehended, I want to say around 2016, 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And that was all because of a DNA testing company. So a family member of his did one of these DNA testing companies, and they matched that up against some of his crime scenes. And they were able to finally apprehend him, 40 years later, 35, 40 years later.
Mm-hmm.
So there is some good with it, but there also is some kind of like murky territory when it comes to what's like a HIPAA violation, what's
Mm-hmm.
permissible to use somebody's DNA without their permission. There's just a whole lot of kind of gray area with these companies, and nobody's checking them.
Yeah, nobody. There's no oversight on these things whatsoever. And in one of these articles, they talk about how 83% of the people who give their DNA over to get these results back are allowing these companies to use for research. Now, of
Right.
course, most of us, we are feeling like, or maybe not, of course, but a lot of us would feel that if I'm going to give it to you for research, it's because you want to help cure cancer
That's
or
right.
diabetes or maybe hopefully be able to track Alzheimer's before it gets to dementia and things like that, to really
Right.
help people. And and they're doing that. The thing is, now they're starting to get a little bit bigger, because I know over the pandemic, 23andMe, they had a 23andMe Plus, which is a subscription. So then people can get access to that. I know Ancestry right now also has a subscription base. Right now, everybody's doing subscription, but the 23andMe Plus, like the Disney Plus, the Apple Plus, this is just getting out of hand. People
Yeah,
are starting to get subscription fatigue. But with
that's right.
83% of people handing this stuff over, what they're doing is then they're turning around, and you can actually go on to the Federal Trade Commission website and see a 23andMe presentation, a PowerPoint presentation, where they're talking about how they want to be in the hospital room with you. And from
Whew.
this standpoint, it's because they want to get into your doctor's ears, so then they know how to treat you, but based off of your gene. Now, of course, that's the whole thing about the systematic racism around healthcare. So if
Right.
you know somebody has a more of an African gene, then how are you going to treat them versus a white person who has European genes? And then they also want to get in the pharmaceuticals, to where now they're dialing up the medicine based
Yeah.
off of that. So really, these DNA companies are moving from just giving people this lineage information, and now being in more healthcare, because there's more money in healthcare, and so
Well,
they're getting in that.
23andMe already struck up a deal with GlaxoSmithKline. So
Mm-hmm.
they
Mm-hmm.
already work with a pharmaceutical company, and they're developing drugs, their own drug treatment line.
Mm.
23andMe is developing its own drug
Mm-hmm.
treatment line. So that just tells you they're trying to not only sell you this kind of genetic information of proposed diseases that you could possibly develop throughout your lifetime, but they also want to give you the medication for it.
Right. Exactly.
So yeah, so it's, to me, it seems like a little bit of a conflict of interest.
A little bit.
A lot of conflict of interest. um, on the surface, it seems like, wow, okay, this is, and a lot of them are part of these like longevity studies.
Mm-hmm.
So they're at least giving the kind of impression that they're interested in helping you. So you
Mm-hmm.
can live to 105, you
Mm-hmm.
can live to whatever age if we catch these things early. So there is that kind of play on the heartstrings of like, oh my God, my mother had this disease. I want to make sure I don't. Let me go
Mm-hmm.
through this testing. And then
Mm-hmm.
here they come and go, okay, you have this percentage chance of having this X disease. Here's this. Let's sell you
Mm-hmm.
this. Let's sell you that. Let's sell you
Mm-hmm.
this.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very capitalistic.
Very
It just,
capitalistic.
it's feeling a little sleazy.
Exactly. And like, there's a video, and this is on YouTube, and we'll put the link in the show notes, of this woman right here. She has an identical twin, and her identical twin, who obviously has the same parents, did
Right.
a test, and both of them yielded different results. And sort of in this video, what they say is that they take just 1% of the 3 billion cells that a person has, and only really sequences that up, so they can only take a piece of it. And so
Wow.
they're not looking at the whole genome. So wherever you're at on that scale, that's how they're determining, based off of their algorithm, how you match up with other people. And that's where it sort of gets dangerous, because they're not taking your whole strand, because obviously that would take up too much work, too much money,
That's
different
right.
things like that. And of course, they are a for-profit business, so
Yeah.
they are trying to keep overhead as low as possible. But to
Right.
know that you're spitting in a cup, and they're only taking less than a bubble to determine what your ancestry is, once again, it yields to this whole, are they being honest? And that's that whole HIPAA thing. With
Yeah.
hospitals, they have to have that. But with these companies, even though they're dealing with science and psychology, and how people are feeling about themselves,
Right. The emotional
the
aspect.
emotional aspect, and it's you're preying on people in a way. But then, I guess there's a good thing, because it does give people a sense of identity. But then once again, you're not being 100%. And even in this piece, where they said that only, I think for these two girls, they were only right 50% of the time. So they took their DNA and was like, oh, we are 50% sure that you may be from here. And I know on Ancestry.com, you can change it to where you can say, well, what if you're 100%? And then it's just like, we don't know.
Yeah.
You know.
Because I mean, and that's one thing that we have to be really mindful of. DNA science is very new.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just thinking about if you watch any like old crime shows or anything like that, I mean, they weren't really using DNA to help solve things until like the 90s, late 80s. And
Mm-hmm.
even then it was murky. So we're talking about a fairly new science that obviously each day it's getting a little bit better, but
Mm-hmm.
we have to be kind of just realistic about this is not an exact science.
Mm.
This is not something that we'll probably ever get an exact, you know, information on. I mean, you could do a paternity test, you know, this is your child, you birthed a child,
Mm-hmm.
and you're 99% the mother. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's like you're not
Mm-hmm.
even 100%. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, it's not something that we're ever going to get this 100% result. And we have to be kind of real about that.
Exactly, exactly. So I see that the chat's blowing up. Anything? What's going on in the chat? What's the chat talking about?
Oh, they're just talking about, yeah, like Omar was talking about, he pumped the brakes on doing the data or doing the DNA stuff because he just wasn't certain how his DNA is going to be used, and I
Mm.
understand that.
Yeah,
And
yeah. He's, he's
Juanita,
he's a black man for sure. Omar, like,
exact right, exactly.
Tuskegee,
Hey,
Tuskegee.
I mean, the thing about it, we got history to back it up.
We do, we do, we do.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then Juanita said it's just a gamble. They're playing on the emotions of genealogy buffs. It's true. All of it's a gamble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, that's my aunt. Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's the historian of our family.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, it's they're playing on our heartstrings. We want to know, and like I've said, I think I've said it to you, I've said it to Omar,
Mm-hmm.
I've said it to many people.
Mm-hmm.
Black people should be getting free genealogy tests. Okay.
Government though backed. Government backed. This should be
Government
part of
backed, obviously.
reparations, right? Part of a reparation
Right.
package. Mm-hmm.
The fact that we have to pay for this is like, okay, you know, that's just a little slap in the face to me. It's like, we're gonna bring your butts here and you're gonna figure it out. We're gonna make you pay to figure out where we got you from. We got you.
See,
It's like, that's not really fair.
and then one of the things too that when I was doing my research like 4 or 5 years ago, good lord, it's been a while, was how white man who identified as white, he lived in Texas for all his life, and then all of a sudden he took the test, and he was like 37 years old, and he had a business, and his business was kind of struggling, but then he found out that he was 15% has 15% sub-Saharan African in him.
Mm-hmm.
So because of that, he was able to apply for minority scholarships, get minority contracts and minority benefits, because with that 15%, that one drop rule, they gave him the benefits of being a minority, even though he was blue-eyed, blonde hair,
You've
white
already
man.
said my hot button item. You've already said my hot button item. Okay. So this is another area that is going to tick me off if this is where we're going to be going, because, you know, I've talked about this ad nauseum with people where Black people have had the hardest time starting businesses and getting these loans, right? So if they're going to allow any Joe Blow that did an Ancestry DNA or whatever test who came back with 3% sub-Saharan African to be able to apply for these business loans and say, I'm Black, I need to have a minority status, I need to have minority benefits, while the rest of us are scrambling trying to get the little $2 that they're giving to our businesses. I have a huge issue with that. I have a huge issue with that. And I have a huge issue when it comes to reparations. If that ever gets on the table for real, how
People can use this
exactly
information.
how are we going to determine who is Black and who isn't? If the one drop rule still persists, then what we all gonna get, about 50 cents each, because everybody's gonna be Black at that point once they do their DNA, because everybody has a little drop. And that's where I have the issue when it comes to some of this, if they're going to be using these companies to determine who gets the loans, who gets reparation, who gets help financially for college, all these various things. I feel like once again, Black people are going to get the short end of the stick, if that's where things are going to go.
Yeah, it's just a never-ending cycle. It's just a never-ending cycle that we just have to be cognizant. We just have to be aware. We also have to use what we like to always talk about on this show: media literacy. Making sure that you just get all the information that you can. But with these DNA companies, you just have to just take it with a grain of salt. Now, that's not saying that they're wrong, you know, but as you had just said, your mother, she had hers, and then all of a sudden it changed, and your dad, his changed, and then everybody's changing, and then, you know, one minute you think you may have a little bit, maybe, let's say Indian, you know, and then all of a sudden it changes up and be like, no, actually, that's more Spanish. You know, that we thought was Indian, but now that we've calculated differently, now we think it's this. Now, they are using some things for advancement of like sickle cell and chicken pox and vaccines and different things like that. So, you know, some of those things, but those are like trials. Those are people who sign up to do these medical trials that then they're able to dial it in. And that's also an issue too, where they're talking about with medicine, is that there's not enough black people who are doing these trials for this medicine, to make sure that these medicines for heart conditions and blood conditions and different things like that can combat. So they are begging for black people to be part of these trials. I'm not the one. I don't think on this show we are not trying to tell you to go out and do these trials,
Right.
but I know that that's one of the excuses that they're trying to get. So if you are identified as mainly African and you give 23andMe your DNA, well, now you don't have to be signed onto a trial because you've already given them the code.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. Basically, using your cells, or they're doing a Henrietta Lacks on us with this.
Exactly.
Honestly.
Exactly. And you know, and one of the things that, you know, sort of that we like to talk about is, like, of course, the content that's out there. And, you know, what was it that sort of got us even thinking about Ancestry? And of course, we have to go to good old Alex Haley in Roots.
Yes.
Now, everybody remembers Roots. Now, I remember watching Roots. Probably I was too young to be watching Roots. I was watching with my cousins and things like that. And fantastic show. Love Roots. And Alex Haley and his work. And it was a piece of work that was based off of his family's sort of oral history, going down about his great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather Kunta Kinte, and how he came to America and how the generations kind of came out, which I think me and you talked about this. This feels like this is the first, like, black saga ever, you know, of talking about a generational thing, almost like The Godfather or any of these other sagas that we talk about, you know. But Alex Haley has been scrutinized most recently, or probably within the last maybe 30 years actually, where he's been questioned on how factual is Roots. You know, like, there were Virginia historians who say Kunta Kinte was in Virginia 2 years prior to whenever Alex Haley said he was here. And, you know, but this was sort of the first conversation, even though we had the Black Power movement in the late 60s, early 70s, Black Arts movement, people wearing dashikis. That's whenever people went away from being colored and Negro to being black and accepting being black. And of course, us feeling comfortable as a black face in a white place.
Right.
And I just saw OJ. I'm sorry, that just stunned me real quick because I forgot LJ ain't black. He's OJ.
He's OJ.
But you know, but this was sort of like a docu-fiction kind of thing, and people want his awards to be taken from him posthumously, which is crazy because who takes away an award posthumously? You know, because they're saying that his stuff wasn't historically accurate and that it was more of a fiction. Like, what's your thoughts on these critiques that Alex Haley's had about his work in Roots?
Well, I didn't know. I mean, this actually, I'm saying that he actually settled out of court in the 70s for plagiarism. I didn't know that. And I also didn't know that Henry Louis Gates called Roots a work of the imagination. So I'm a little shocked, but I also wasn't taking Roots at face value. I was expecting, as I do with a lot of films and television shows, of there, you know, to be some kind of like creative license, and maybe based on a true story, but not necessarily all the factual information is going into the production. So I wasn't expecting it to be, you know, word for word, character by character, event by event, completely true. But I did not realize that there was this plagiarism accusation, you know, almost from the inception of the miniseries in the 70s. I didn't know that. So that was a shock to me.
Right. Yeah, and here's Alex Haley, and once again, we'll have this link, but he's giving an interview about when he was trying to write for the character of Kunta Kinte as a child, kind of going over the Middle Passage, and he actually describes how he's talking about him as a character and how he sort of needs to get into his skin. So what Alex Haley does is he travels back to Nigeria and then finds a boat that is traveling from Nigeria back to Africa. And every night...
Back to America?
Back to America. What did I say? Back to Africa?
Yeah.
Okay. So he was leaving Africa to come back to America and wanted to go through the Middle Passage. So every night he would go into the bowels of the ship and sleep there by himself, wanting to be packed up against stuff and just sort of feel what it was like. And he said that he had suicidal thoughts during that time. You know, thinking about ending his life because of just the horrors. And of course, he was, well, of course, not, I'm not saying of course,
Wow.
but he was dealing with a lot of money issues. He was dealing with some family issues. He was a struggling writer. He did the autobiography of
Yeah.
Malcolm X, but he just wasn't getting any other things. And it really goes into depth as far as how far he took to really get into this character. But in one of these articles, they say that the difference between fiction and journalism, because that's what they were sort of talking to Alex Haley about, or going after him about. Was it journalism? Was it documentary? Was it research? But the difference between fiction and journalism is that journalism deals with facts while fiction deals with truths. And I believe that that's somewhat truth is, in order to really kind of bear down on something, sometimes you have to put a little bit of glitter on it, for people
Right.
to really comprehend it.
Right.
And I don't know. And yeah, he did have some plagiarism. He paid what, 16 grand, I think, in plagiarism cause for
I don't know
Roots.
the amount, but I mean, obviously that part, if you're literally taking somebody's work,
Yeah.
then that just isn't going to fly. I mean, that's what we talk about all the time about what happens to us as black people. And like I just said about the whole TikTok thing, it's like
Mm-hmm.
you can't take people's work and not give them that credit and that shout out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if that's what happened, obviously the courts deemed that it was a factual case that the person brought against him or group entity, whatever, brought against him.
Mm-hmm.
So that's obviously not right. But I don't know if we'll ever know the details. I'm not sure if there's even are the complete details out
Mm-hmm.
about that, who
Mm-hmm.
this person is, what
Right.
exactly. So because if we're talking about one part of the story was
Mm-hmm.
plagiarized, or are we talking about literally the entire Roots anthology
Mm-hmm.
was, completely taken from somebody else? Like, I'd like to know the details on that.
I would too. Yeah, that's something that's very interesting. The thing is, though, if it was plagiarized, does it take away from the impact? Because the impact has already been set. People have, it changed people's mindset as far
Right.
as how they're thinking about themselves in America, thinking about, I want to know what happened before. Now, of course, majority of Roots was about slavery. Majority of it was about
Right.
slavery. So we don't want to kind of focus in on that part, but really this whole journey of coming from Africa and
Yeah.
where we were at peace and things like that, and then how colonization brought us over here. I I think it gave people a sense of wanting to pursue this beyond slavery mentality, which
Absolutely.
I believe was effective. And of course, we have, and of course, you just mentioned my man, Mr. Henry Louis Gates, and his show, which is Finding My
Yeah,
Roots, which is a fantastic show. I love that show. But
I do too.
Henry Louis Gates uses 23andMe and Ancestry.com for his
That's
results.
right.
But there's some other stuff that he also does on the show that sort of helps formulate the story, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to go back to your original kind of idea or questioning about, is Roots valuable now? Now that we
Mm-hmm.
know that there's some controversy behind it,
Uh-huh.
I think yes. I think this is also like a cancel culture kind of conversation, right? It's like, do we cancel Roots
Mm-hmm.
because we know that it's plagiarized and partially made up? And that's one of those questions where my answer is no.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't think you cancel something that really was pivotal into the African American experience, and also kind of sparking this interest and this desire to, again, find your roots. I think without roots, would there be Henry Louis Gates? Without roots, would there be um, these companies popping up now? The root ancestries and all that stuff. I think that a lot of people outside of the Black community want to know where they're from, but I think we're probably the main kind of I don't want to say consumers because I don't know that, I don't have that information, but I think we're a big part of the consumer market in this industry because that's an attractive kind of company model to figure out where we're from, what tribe we're from, what countries we're a part of, are we made up of. I think that's something that, somebody who was an immigrant from, Scotland, they know,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
They know they're Scottish, they know
Mm-hmm.
they're whatever. But if you're from America, if you're from the Caribbean islands, if you're from South America and you're of African or Afro descent, we don't have that detailed information
Mm-hmm.
unless we have these like amazing record keepers that,
Mm-hmm.
in our family, which most of
Mm-hmm.
us don't have these family members that kept records for 400 years. I
Mm-hmm.
wish we did, and they just weren't even able to do that. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't even feasible. So yeah, I don't think you get rid of roots because I think without roots you wouldn't have spawned what we, these pilgrimages we're going on today. I mean, like what, in 2019 or 2018, they had that pilgrimage back to Ghana,
Hmm.
that a lot of people kind of all went at the same time in December. And that was like a, not to say that we're from, not everybody obviously is from Ghana, but just African Americans getting to the continent is like a journey and a feat in of itself, because a lot of us still haven't had the opportunity to do that.
Hmm.
So I do think it spawned our imaginations and our desire to just kind of connect with the place that we're from and the greatness that we had been kind of shielded from us.
I 100% agree because I know whenever I did my thesis, a question that I would ask, and I would go around, man on the street with the camera, and I would ask two questions: what's your race? What's your ethnicity?
Yeah.
If I asked somebody who looked like Caucasian, if I asked them what their race was, they would say, I'm white. If I asked them what their ethnicity was, they would say, well, I'm a mutt. I'm a mutt. I'm Scottish. I'm Irish. I'm from
Right.
Wales. Or an Asian person. Like you ask an Asian person, they know I'm
Yeah.
Korean. I'm
Yep.
Japanese. Even people that are Spanish or Latina or
Right.
Latinx,
Hmm.
like you can't call a Puerto Rican a Mexican or a Mexican a Dominican. Like they know, even though that's even within the diaspora, but
Yeah, it is.
still,
Yeah.
it's still within the diaspora, but they still have a sense of identity that's not on this continent. You ask a
Right.
black person what their race is, I'm black. If you ask, or African American, whichever side that they fit on, if you ask them what their ethnicity, they're black because black is an ethnicity.
Right.
Black
Right.
is an ethnicity, but it started from slavery. And we get tired of talking about slavery all the time, but it's just something that just has to be
We
talked
can't we
about.
can't escape it.
We can't escape it. So for us to have some sort of identity beyond that, now, does that change how we are as black people? For a lot of black people, it does. Like you said, people went back on pilgrimages.
Hmm.
People are now having African art that is from the motherland, or that they identify with the most,
Right.
and it does probably make them feel more comfortable, with wearing their hair out. We're wearing different colors and doing different customs, and maybe even implementing more customs. Not the
Right.
Kwanzaa sort of thing, which is of course an American-made holiday.
Made tradition.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. But maybe something of that ilk. People are trying to do that, which psychologically can be beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think for me, it's actually made me more African American. I hate to even
Mm.
use that. I don't even use that.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
made me more proud of what we've made out of nothing.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Mhm.
even though I'm happy to know where my lineage is traced back to,
Mhm.
and it gives me kind of like a framework, when I
Mhm.
do make it to the continent.
Mhm.
But I'm actually just really happy of what my ancestors have endured to get
Mhm.
me here,
Yeah, man.
because most people wouldn't have made it. Okay, like any other group, any other ethnicity, I don't think they would have made it the way we have endured. I just don't, and that gives me pride just to know that after just enduring just years and years of servitude and chattel slavery and abuse after abuse, and then the castration, financial castration of the 19th century, and now we're in the 20th century. We're still dealing with kind of some castration, but we're still here. We're still having children. We're still finding joy in things. I think it puts a cherry on top of me knowing, obviously I came from somewhere, which I already knew in the back of my mind,
Mhm.
but it makes me more prideful of the fact that we're still, thriving in a place we weren't supposed to.
Right. I mean, that's a very good point. Like I have to point that out too, is that a bloodline was able to make it to us
Yeah.
that could have been wiped out. And they
Wiped
tried.
out.
And
They
they've
tried.
tried on so many different
Hmm.
occasions, but our bloodline was able to at least keep going for us to have melanin in our skin, to identify
Yep.
as black, to have kinky hair, and to
Yep.
still have some soul. For us to make
Hmm.
it this far is an achievement. So I would say that, that is a very good point. I definitely 100% agree
Yeah.
with that. And,
Oh, and Tristan brings in. So we have to do one point, because
oh,
there is
yeah.
a group. So my brother, he's started to say that he's Native Black American or foundational Black American.
Mm,
And I've been seeing this a lot lately,
okay.
because there's a group that believes, and I actually do believe this, because we
Mm-hmm,
were explorers before we
mm-hmm,
were
mm-hmm,
captive and
mm-hmm,
brought here.
mm-hmm,
That there's a group that believes that black people were here before chattel
mm-hmm,
slavery,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and black people came here under their free will without being brought here in the Middle Passage. So
mm-hmm.
a lot of people kind of have this mindset of, and actually Henry Louis Gates had a few people on a show, and I believe, don't quote me, that Ava DuVernay
Mm-hmm.
and Ta-Nehisi Coates were two, don't quote me though, were two people that had no slavery lineage.
Mm-hmm.
Their family had no slavery lineage. So there is some data that backs up that black people were here
Mm-hmm.
in the Americas, and escaped chattel slavery. Some group, some families were able to escape that because they were already here, and they were able to kind of like avoid, by probably living outside of the South, or living, maybe even like where Mexico is, wherever. So that is something that's interesting that I'd love to talk about at some point too. That is a possibility for many of us, that maybe
Mm-hmm.
we were able to bypass slavery. That's not all of our history. That's not all of our story.
That is very true. No, that is very true. I mean, we definitely know that the Moors were heavily involved in the constellations and navigation.
Yeah, right.
So I, I would definitely go with that as well. That there were black people already here.
Hmm.
But of course, with my lineage saying I'm from Nigeria, I ain't. So unfortunately, Tristan, brother, I
Well,
can't
that's not
really.
necessarily true, though. If you think about it,
True.
just
Well,
because
maybe.
our lineage traced back doesn't mean
True.
that those
True.
Nigerians did not come here on their free will at some point.
Right. 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 What else are they saying in the chat right now? I
So we
see.
have people kind of talking about what Tristan was saying,
Mm-hmm.
and then Omar said he definitely feels like their black people are native. Some black people are native too,
Mm-hmm.
and even like I knew somebody that was showing me pictures of some Native Americans in North Carolina, and when I saw those pictures, I'm like, they're native or they black? Which one? Because they don't
Mm-hmm.
look the typical of what
Mm-hmm.
you imagine a Native American to look like. They look like black people to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what tribe it is in North Carolina, but apparently there's a lot that look look African, but they are on reservations. They look, similar to us, but they are native, and I don't know exactly what tribe they are. So
Mm.
that's not like a far-fetched idea. I think it's one thing they just don't want us to kind of really uncover, to say some of us maybe were not brought here by
Right.
y'all.
Right.
Some of us
Critical
were
race theory.
exploring. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
yeah,
More history that they just want to keep on hiding from us,
that's
that
right.
we have to take upon ourselves to go out and do the research.
That's
So
right.
so definitely great point. Definitely great point. Yeah. As a matter of fact, your aunt says it was a black man who navigated Columbus to America. I think there was a couple of people that said that in the chat.
Exactly. That's right.
So like we know that. So in order, but yet they say he got lost. Gonna do one of them. What is it? The Nigerian Nollywood. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. However, I can't do
Yeah.
it, but however they do that
His
little
teeth.
sarcastic thing.
Insert his teeth.
So yeah, no, I think that's really good. I see that Omar also said I think there's a high demand in the American market because they know Black Americans are disconnected from the motherland and they want to know. Lots of buyers, not so much in Denmark.
Yeah. Right.
Well, they have a history of passing things down. Your
Yeah.
family's German, your family's this, your family, is that, and we come from this. And that's that whole ethnicity question, because we know that America's a melting pot. So for us to be able to identify with a flag that is not of the red, white, and blue,
Hmm.
we're the only ethnicity that can't do that. But it could be just because of conditioning. Well, actually, all of it has to do with conditioning
Yeah.
and acculturation, really.
Right.
So that's where the danger of us putting so much full stock in these DNA companies is sometimes dangerous, because
It
because
is.
they know we're hungry for this information, that we're so
That's right.
thirsty for wanting to know about ourselves, that yeah, they're just passing out black cards. Like, yeah, you
Yeah.
super black, yeah, you black, you kind of
And,
black.
and omitting the native card, right?
Letting
So it's
them
like,
name
that's what I
card.
brought up earlier. It's like, we're talking about we're native, or we have, I think one area that my dad said that, like I said, mysteriously disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
One of his percentages was Americas. So that's
Mm-hmm.
native.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden, that America's line, or people of Americas, which is native, was
Mm-hmm.
gone
Mm-hmm.
from his lineage.
Mm-hmm.
Now, like I said, there's no federal, oversight with these companies. I can imagine there's some sort of like clause of like, don't give too much to the Negro to the Negroes.
Mm-hmm.
Don't tell them too much. We don't want to have
Right.
any sort of liability, any sort of explanation. I mean, look what Juneteenth.
Yes.
Look at 1619 Project. Look at
Mm-hmm.
critical race theory.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime you want to tell the truth or give the truth out when it comes to the African people, who puts a stop to it? Who wants to make sure it's watered down? Who wants to make sure not all the information gets out? So if we do these DNA tests and more of us get America's, any sort of native, language on those DNA tests, oh man, it's going to be, okay, let's have a chat, federal government. Let's have a chat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so.
Which, like you said, the government should be paying for this, so then they can know exactly how much they're going to be paying everybody. I just want my student loans to be taken care of. Really,
That's
me.
it.
I mean, now I would like a check, and I know not every black person has student loans like me. So maybe you
Right.
give them a check, but if you just take care of my student loans, I very
Right.
much appreciate it. And a
Student
pilgrimage
loans, give
back.
me a business grant, something. Just give me some money.
Make it even. Just make it even. You know.
Yep.
And of course, I showed you the picture yesterday that we thought we were getting somewhere, but then Uncle Ben's is back on the shelf. Did you get that picture I sent you?
I saw that.
That was taken just that day. I sent it to you exactly that day. They said it was taking Uncle Ben's. He ain't off the shelf. His black face is still up there. Trust me. They just wanted to stop for a moment, and now they were like, oh well, now we gave him a holiday. Yep. Now we can start having these things start coming up, just like the post that we posted, that you actually posted up on the social media about Lovecraft Country being canceled. But then yet it got one of the most nominations for the Emmys this past time. And so the fight still is not over. Okay. But yeah, I mean,
keep on reading.
Just keep on reading. But yeah, with the content, Alex Haley definitely Roots. That's definitely controversial. Henry Louis Gates. His stuff is kind of good because he does use a lot of research and stuff like that. But also there's books, there's genealogical communities and conferences and different things like that people can explore. But as black people, we sort of just have to be careful with this information. Just use some literacy because we know that they're always trying to pull one over on us. That's right. That's about it.
Literacy for everything that we consume.
Exactly. Well, is there anything else, we want to close out with?
I'm looking at some of the chat. Everybody's popping today. So we've got my brother. Look up the Seminole Wars in Florida. All of them were Native black people. Mm-hmm. And let's see. And Juanita, not all black people came from Africa. That's another thing too. Yeah. Not all black people came from Africa, and that's another kind of like deep dive that I'd like to take. Mm-hmm. We got so much. And that's why we know that we can't compartmentalize this all into one conversation. We just wanted to kind of give you a brief over. We're looking to bring some guests on, some experts to kind of help us dive deep into this conversations. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
What else are they saying?
This is great. We were hoping y'all were going to drop some jams, and you did. Thank you for coming and participating. This was great. And we'll be doing, again, like we said, every show we make sure that when we say we're going to do it again, we try to really do it again and bring some more information to the table. So this was a great conversation. We love y'all popping in the chat like this. Mm-hmm. So.
Absolutely. I mean, once again, we missed you guys. We know it's been a little minute, but it's great to see everybody back in the chat, making it go and just feeding us. We love just doing this show with you guys because, as you guys know, you're the third host of the show. Right. Now, we will be back next week, but next week is just going to be our season finale. We've been working hard over the summer. We've had sort of these summer hours. Now we want to, again, regroup. We're going to have some content still being produced, but it's not going to be the actual main show. But we will be coming back in September. But next week, we're just going to have a wrap-up show, talk about some of the things that has happened this year. We're, over the halfway mark of the year, and just want to have a conversation with our family.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Mm-hmm. And so anything else you want to add, or any comments you want to kind of talk about?
No, I'm happy to see you guys, and like I said, we'll have our final or finale show for season 2. And as always, we love it when you guys give us information that you'd like to hear on the next season or the next show. So on social media, on our Through a Culture Lens IG and Facebook, and on YouTube, write what you'd like to talk about. Write what you'd like us to research. We'd love to hear that information.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys. We love having you guys. We missed you guys, but thank you for coming back. Yeah, definitely like and subscribe. I think we only have a couple likes up there. So, you can take the chat down for just a moment. Just take the chat down. Hit that like, hit that share button. Follow us on Instagram because we have a lot of conversations on there. Facebook, we're trying to get things up on there. But Instagram just seems like people are a lot more nicer. So we like Instagram a lot better.
Facebook, they're all.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to work the Facebook page. I'll be honest. Our Facebook page is a mess. So please, if you're on Instagram, go to Instagram. We're trying to get our Facebook page to be a little more seamless, a little bit more user friendly. So
absolutely, guys. So once again, thank you for watching Through a Cultured Lens. Love, peace, and power.
Y'all, see you next week.